The instant Li Fan laid eyes on that crimson figure, a torrent of knowledge poured into his mind. Sole arbiters of heaven and earth served as the tangible embodiments of the world's fundamental laws. Whenever certain conditions were fulfilled, a sole arbiter would manifest, appearing somewhere across the realm. Once heaven initiated its killing mechanisms with the intent to wipe out cultivators, these arbiters would carry out the plan. They possessed no independent will, driven solely by ingrained instincts. They were the laws incarnate, slaughtering cultivators as though they were livestock. Their sole purpose was to eliminate those who dared defy the natural order. To cultivators, encountering a sole arbiter signaled extreme peril. Being marked by one almost invariably meant death. Yet, as manifestations of the great Tao's laws, sole arbiters also represented an unparalleled opportunity. As the ancient saying went, sacrifice the soul of heaven and earth to merge one's body with the Tao. Should a cultivator succeed in slaying and refining a sole arbiter, they would instantly ascend to the Tao unity realm, regardless of their prior cultivation level. Having glimpsed the sole arbiter known as Crimson Flame, an uncontrollable wave of greed surged from the depths of Li Fan's heart. Devour it, and grasp the great Tao, devour it and achieve immortality in supreme glory. It felt like a starving man suddenly stumbling upon a lavish banquet, or a parched traveler in the desert discovering a clear, flowing spring. This voracious desire murmured in his ear like a devil, relentlessly urging and tempting him to rush toward the crimson figure hovering in the sky. Li Fan frantically circulated the Xianhuang Heart Refinement Sutra, struggling to suppress the scorching heat radiating from the deep-sea pearl and quell the raging greed consuming his heart. He understood perfectly well that he could only observe Crimson Flame through the borrowed perception granted by the deep-sea pearl. To Crimson Flame, Li Fan was nothing more than the nascent consciousness of the deep sea. Even after sensing his gaze, it had merely glanced in his direction once before losing interest. But if Li Fan lost control, attacked Crimson Flame, and exposed himself as a cultivator, he would be ruthlessly annihilated. Reason and desire clashed violently within Li Fan's soul, two opposing forces threatening to tear his consciousness apart. He could only grimly maintain the flow of the Xianhuang Heart Refinement Sutra, clinging desperately to his Tao heart. He had no idea how much time passed before the storm of greed finally began to recede. Shaken to his core by the ordeal, Li Fan dared not continue observing. Surviving this brief glimpse into heaven's mechanisms with his sanity intact was already an extraordinary stroke of fortune. As his consciousness prepared to withdraw from the deep-sea pearl and return to his body, Li Fan made a mortifying discovery. Resisting the greed triggered by the sole arbiter had taken him nearly half a year. His consciousness had remained fused with the deep-sea pearl for far too long, exceeding the endurance limits of a Qi refinement cultivator. For the moment, while still connected to the pearl, he was safe, but the instant he returned to his physical body, he would likely age rapidly and perish soon after. The consequences of merely glancing at it from afar were already this devastating. It appeared his cultivation journey in this lifetime was destined to end here. Though a trace of regret lingered, Li Fan felt no deep bitterness in his heart. He had uncovered the truth behind the cataclysm that had engulfed the Tsongyun Sea and personally witnessed the sole arbiter, Crimson Flame. He had also directly contemplated the mechanisms of heaven and earth. His gains in this life were undeniably vast. Even if it ended now, he could accept it. Still, he had no intention of activating return to truth and bringing this lifetime to a close just yet. Since he was already here, he might as well make the most of the situation. With his consciousness now trapped within the deep-sea pearl, he resolved to seize this rare chance to further contemplate the energy mechanisms of heaven and earth, as long as he refrained from foolishly spying on the sole arbiter again. It should pose no further danger. Li Fan drew a thread of pure energy from the deep-sea pearl to shield his physical body, preventing it from decaying. His lifespan had already run dry. Without a body to sustain it, his consciousness was like water without a source or a tree without roots, slowly fading within the pearl. By his estimation, it could endure for perhaps another dozen years. If he used this time wisely, he could still achieve something meaningful. Then, his consciousness once again immersed itself in the perspective of the deep-sea pearl. He observed the ceaseless flow of heaven and earth's energy mechanisms, the eternal cycle of sun, moon, and stars. He watched as the last vestiges of life in the Tsongyun Sea faded away one after another. he sensed the cold, indifferent, unchanging killing mechanisms that permeated the entire world. Just like that, 5 years passed in the blink of an eye. By anchor year 40, the Tsongyan Sea had long since dried up completely, reduced to a desolate wasteland. Only Tian Island, shielded by Li Fan's protection, continued to harbor a small group of surviving mortals. One day, Li Fan suddenly felt a stir in his heart and looked up toward the sky. The crimson figure that had loomed there for more than a decade had finally vanished. Having fulfilled its purpose, it naturally dissipated. No one could predict where it might one day reappear in the cultivation world. Li Fan gazed in the direction where crimson flame had disappeared, then once more sank his mind into the deep-sea pearl. As time wore on, Li Fan's consciousness grew increasingly faint. His thoughts slowed and grew sluggish. He lost the capacity for independent thought, silently observing the world solely through the lens of the deep-sea pearl. In the second year after Crimson Flame's disappearance, several cultivators clad in blue robes arrived at the Tsongyan Sea. Casting spell after spell, they finally summoned rain from the heavens. It was a long overdue deluge. Soon, more cultivators followed. Azure light bloomed across the parched seabed. Vegetation began to sprout from the cracked earth, brimming with life. A gentle breeze swept through, and trees rose from the ground. In less than a year, the scorched land had regained its vitality. The recent catastrophe of crimson flame evaporating the sea felt like nothing more than a distant nightmare, gently swept away. The Tsongyan Sea had completed its transformation into the Tsongyan mountain range. A city gradually took shape in the sky above the mountains. Once completed, it drew cultivators from every corner of the world. In anchor year 48, a foundation establishment cultivator returned to the Tsongyan Sea. He arrived at what had once been Lili Island, now Lili Mountain. His expression was heavy with sorrow. Nearby, Li Fan's divine sense brushed over the scene. A wave of melancholy washed over him as well. Li Fan recognized this man. It was Zhang Haobo, who had once chosen to leave the Tsongyan Sea because of a vague sense of foreboding. 20 years had passed, and through some unknown stroke of fortune, this man had actually reached the Foundation establishment realm. The events of this lifetime flashed through Li Fan's mind in rapid succession. His consciousness stood on the verge of complete dissipation. Just before fading entirely, Li Fan's consciousness returned to his physical body. The more than 10 years of insights into the energy mechanisms of heaven and earth finally shattered the bottleneck that had long held back his breakthrough. Spiritual chi surged inward, and in an instant, Li Fan's cultivation broke through to the late-stage chi refinement realm. A faint smile touched Li Fan's lips, then froze in place. His body aged rapidly, and as a gust of wind passed over, it crumbled into dust, scattering into the world. In his final moment, Li Fan cried out inwardly, "Return to truth." A properties notification panel appeared. This simulation has ended. You may choose one of the following options. Retain an item you possessed in this simulation, retain your cultivation level from this simulation, retain the simulated memories of one closely associated individual. These memories can be inherited by that person. Forfeit the above choices to accelerate the charging process. Consciousness slowly returned. Eventually, Li Fan felt the youthful vigor of his 20-year-old body restored. He decisively chose the second option, to retain his cultivation level. After all, personal strength formed the true foundation. A mere mortal holding a powerful treasure was nothing but an invitation for disaster. Besides, Li Fan knew the deep-sea pearl still remained on Luyun Island. He could retrieve it when the time was right. As he made his selection, 2 familiar strands of spiritual chi materialized within his dantian. An inexplicable fluctuation washed over him, and moments later, the spiritual chi in his dantian erupted like a raging torrent, flooding through his entire body. Wherever it passed, it transformed his physique and elevated his cultivation realm. Early-stage chi refinement realm, mid-stage chi refinement realm, late-stage chi refinement realm, in the span of a single breath. He attained the level that his previous self had struggled an entire lifetime to reach. Li Fan's aura steadied, yet his face remained filled with awe, not because of the instantaneous leap to late-stage chi refinement, but because of that inexplicable fluctuation. He had felt it clearly. The moment that fluctuation touched him, the immortal miasma within his body vanished completely, eradicated in an instant. Its effect far surpassed the forced expulsion he had achieved through the body purification spirit pool array in his previous life. That fluctuation. Li Fan pondered the fleeting sensation, finding it vaguely familiar. It's the will of heaven, the power of its laws. The realization dawned on him. In his previous life, he had spent more than a decade using the deep-sea peril to observe the operation of heaven and earth's energy mechanisms. Though far from capable of controlling them, he could still recognize their nature. If immortal miasma represented the will of heaven and earth that separated immortals from mortals, then that fluctuation was its complete opposite. The plague that had plagued the cultivation world for thousands of years was eradicated so effortlessly. Return to truth is truly astonishing. If I can master this method of purifying the immortal miasma. Li Fan's mind raced with possibilities. The path of cultivation is incredibly arduous, especially in this world, where cultivators plunder heaven and earth, and killing mechanisms permeate the realm. When I first entered the cultivation world in my previous life, I met Su Changyu. His unwavering devotion to the Tao and exceptional will made me believe he was destined for greatness. Who could have imagined he would die mysteriously after just a few days? In contrast, the seemingly ordinary Xiao Heng by his side possessed heaven-defying talent. In just a few years, he showed promise of establishing his Tao foundation. Both he Zhenghao and I were convinced he would undoubtedly reach the Golden Core realm within his lifetime. Yet who could have foreseen that heaven and earth had long ago set its killing mechanisms in motion? All living beings in the Tsongyan Sea, whether on the path to success or failure, cultivator or mortal, were already doomed to perish. Only that unremarkable fisherman, Zhang Haobo, escaped the calamity and advanced to the foundation establishment realm. There truly is no better illustration of fate's unpredictability. Then, a trace of doubt surfaced. Just as I once told Xiaohun, if government officials plan to surround and eliminate bandits, they won't alert the bandits beforehand. The relationship between this world and cultivators mirrors that between the government and bandits. Thus, when heaven unleashes its killing mechanisms to exterminate cultivators, cultivators naturally cannot perceive it. That is also why, when I asked the Tianxian mirror if any disasters loomed in the near future, it answered that none would occur. Its calculations were obscured by heaven's mechanisms. According to calculations, no major disasters will descend within the next 10 years. Yet the Manhua Trade Association seemed to have detected the impending calamity long in advance, quietly ordering all their members to withdraw from the Tsongyan Sea. How did they manage to foresee it? And why didn't they warn the Myriad Immortals Alliance, instead sitting back and allowing countless lives to perish? There must be something suspicious behind this, in this life. If the opportunity arises, I must uncover the truth. After careful deliberation for a long time, Li Fan began mapping out his plans for this lifetime. The cultivation world is exceedingly perilous. It's wiser not to step foot there rashly before the virtualization charging is complete. Now that I cultivate the Xianhuang Heart Refinement Sutra, the charging speed has increased dramatically. It should no longer take 20 years to reach 100%, 10 years should suffice. This way, I can arrive in the cultivation world more than a decade earlier than in my previous life. From what I recall, something significant seemed to have occurred in the Tsongyan Sea during those 10+ years. I can prepare in advance.